It's easy to go online and find a list of the best flowers. But one of the hardest things about farming is learning what is the best flowers for you. Here on Red Roof Family Farm, we have just completed our first year of exclusively flower farming. When we started the farm 4 years ago, we were doing mostly veggies with only some flowers to complement. So there was lots of things to be learned by putting our 100% focus just on what was originally one of our many crops. Because we sell at the farmer's market and then also our roadside stand, we are targeting a different customer than some other flower farms. We're mainly selling retail and we are targeting people who like grocery store bouquets. We are not a full service florist. We're not doing weddings. We're not doing very many special orders. We're mostly just a grab and go $20 wrap bouquet. Very simple, very easy. Because of this focus, my goal is always to find what bouquet styles sell the best to the most people so that I can replicate that same bouquet over and over and over again. I consider there to be 3 flower seasons here on the farm. We have spring flowers, which are tulips and ranunculus, and a different look and a different type of customer. And then we have summer flowers, which will have lilies and sunflowers and all of those fun things that we love to grow in our gardens. And then finally, we have fall flowers, which for me are still a lot of those same summer crops, but in a different color palette. We're gonna be darker and moodier. We're going to be getting bouquets for Thanksgiving. We're gonna be getting bouquets for back to school. This list that I came up with covers all of those seasons. It's the 10 best sellers of the year. And as I've thought about it, I found it very interesting. Not all of these things I would consider the best crops of the year were focal flowers. It's easy to always bring your focus and your attention and your priority to those showstoppers. And it's easy to forget the way the supporting cast can really carry your season. Thanks to our sponsor, Ritual. Life is busy on the farm and it can be hard to find time to take care of myself, but I always prioritize taking a daily vitamin. And Ritual makes this extra easy for me because they're delivered to my door monthly. They have a whole line of multivitamins for the entire family, and I've also been taking Symbiotic Plus for my gut health. I like that the multivitamins are gentle on an empty stomach with a delayed release capsule design so I can take them as soon as I wake up. This made it easy for me to build a lasting habit. With New Year's and resolutions just around the corner, now's a great time to think about what habits you want for 2023. Better health doesn't happen overnight, and right now Ritual's offering you all 20% off your first month. Fill in the gaps in your diet with Essential for Women, a small step that helps support a healthy foundation for your body. That's 20% off 1 month's worth of vitamins or protein by going to ritual.com/20-grass and using the code 20-grass at checkout. My number 1 best flower of 2022 was Wowie Zinnia. And for me, this came as a really big surprise. This was a zinnia that I purchased just as a fun experiment. I wasn't really expecting very much. Ian had expressed that he wanted a multicolored, bright colored zinnia. He felt that having something multicolored would bring in the customers. And so this I just added onto the order to give him a chance to try out his feedback. And he was 100% right, because this was the most exciting flower of the year for our customer. Anytime we used Wowie Zinnia, that bouquet sold first. Multiple people contacted me being like, what is this? Anytime I shared pictures of this zinnia, there was so much excitement, so much sales came out of this flower. I didn't want this flower to be successful. This zinnia was shorter than my Bennery's Giant zinnias, which are my number 1 zinnia crop. It started early. It was one of the first to blooms, but kind of the first round of blooms were completely useless. They were so short that I wasn't able to put them into bouquets, and I was really nervous that they never were gonna get long enough to properly use in bouquets. Because I didn't really have the same excitement for it, I cut it very aggressively. I would cut off, a third of the plant to get a single stem long enough to use. And being so aggressive with my pruning habits of the plant did eventually lead to the summer it producing long enough stems. I love Bennery's giant zinnias because of their disease resistance. Powdery mildew can take out your zinnia crops, and honestly, even with our low humidity here, I still think it's best to be planting zinnias for only, picking off of each plant for a month. These zinnias I picked off until late fall. We had a very, very beautiful fall, very warm, and it kept producing. It did start to show some signs of disease damage by the fall, but it showed signs of disease damage similar to Bennery's giant. So I was really happy with the longevity of the plant that kind of made up for, its slow start to the season. The other problem with Wowie Zinnia is the seed is crazy expensive. It was expensive enough that even me, who loves spending money on seeds, was resistant to making this a regular purchase. But, we're probably gonna grow 100 of them next year. There's gonna be a half bed. They were so popular. We are buying again, and I'm just gonna have to suck it up because no seed cost is going to undermine the fact that we were able to sell thousands of dollars just because of this one flower. Number 2 is Roxanne Brown Lisianthus. This was our first year having Lisianthus to sell on the farm. And my favorite and Ian's favorite of the Lisianthus colors was blue. We had this incredible blue that was so vibrant, so gorgeous, so fun to work with. But despite that, Roxanne Brown is is on this list, not any of the other colors, because the growth habit of the Roxanne series was so beautiful, so formal, so classic. It was perfect as a florist cut. I actually sold these to florists, even though I don't really have very much florist sales. It was the first of my Lisianthus to bloom. So, nice, quick blooming plant. The flowers themselves were, just amazing shape. The Roxanne shape of the Lisianthus, very, very beautiful, very formal, very stunning. And then the color. There isn't things in that same color palette. The browns have been so popular with all the boho trends coming around. We've had so many boho bride type themes that having this formal plant in this hard to find color makes it so it's valuable in the way no other flower is valuable. We are going all in on Lisianthus next year. We grew over 1,000 plants this year, and we have plans for up to 2,000 next year. These are incredible plants. If I had a top 100 list, I would put 15 different Lisianthus on this list, but because it's only 10, the best of the Lisianthus is the Roxanne Brown, and I'm gonna have to limit myself there. Number 3 is Indian Summer Rudbeckia. This is a very boring plant. My customers are not excited about these yellow Rudbeckias in the field. No one thinks it's the showstopper, despite, it being a stunning wall. These are the flower that gets ignored. Rudbeckia is always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But despite that, the crop that probably made me the most money this year was Rudbeckia. These plants produce so many stems. Because they produce so many stems, they're easy to pick. I don't feel like I have to sell it for an extravagant amount of money. Those Lisianthus, we need to make sure that we're charging the right amount to cover the crop. With the Rudbeckia, I can easily sell these as a cheap $1 filler flower. And even though they are not selling for much, they still made me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Most of my summer bouquets had 4 of the Indian Summer Rudbeckia in them, and I was making 100 a week. That's, if I only charged $1 for it, that's 400 every week, and these start producing from June until the frost. So an incredible crop. It has to be Indian Summer for me because I found other Rudbeckias not to be as consistently wilt free. Indian Summer always good, great vase life. It had these massive flowers. They could almost be so big they'd be too big. But because of that, there was so many different ways and different looks that I could achieve with them. Other crops I might give up in the future, but I don't think Indian Summer Rudbeckia is ever gonna be off of my top 10 list. Number 4 is Coco Gold Marigold. Last year we experimented with marigolds for the very first time. I just did an experiment of, small patch, about 50 plants, and I loved them. I wished I had more. So I made a huge focus on marigolds this year. I ended up trying lots of colors, lots of varieties, and I planted a bed and a half of them in total, and I still didn't feel like I had enough. But the one that shone above, the one that I used whenever I had the choice to, was the Coco Gold. The color is absolutely perfect. It's kind of this perfect cross between orange and yellow, but sometimes for me, yellow can feel a little childish and be hard to design with. But with this glowing orange tone to it, it made it so that it still had a sophistication that I could use as a base for almost every single color palette that I do on the farm in both the summer and the fall. Coco also produced way earlier than my other marigold varieties, and it was tall. It was really easy to find branches that weren't so splayed open. They were very vertical side branches, so it made it very usable. The way that I like to use a marigold in our market bouquets is as a single stem that has many branches coming off of it. And I use it as a base to build my bouquet around. So for me, a marigold isn't necessarily a focal flower or a secondary flower or a filler flower. It is a structure. And those one stems can create so much volume in my bouquets that it's not necessarily visible what I'm doing with the marigold in the vase, in the wrapped bouquet, but it adds a lot of value. It visually adds more value than what you can normally charge for a single marigold. So I found them hugely valuable. Next year, we are going to be growing even more of the Coco series. I'd only been able to find gold specifically in the past, but I'm going to be looking for the yellow, the orange, and the gold to grow in the future. I really love them. Number 5 is Statice in the blue color. Statice is incredible. The first time I grew Statice, I fell in love, and I struggled to get to the point that I could grow it for the first time, so it meant even more to me to be able to have it successfully grown. The trick, it needs to grow in the cold. You can't plant it in the summer, you have to plant it in the spring. I love all the colors. Every color I want. This year, growing Statice, I grew every color in its own chunk. But when I was too busy to be able to get out there and pick all of my Statice, because I ended up having 100 feet planted of it in total, there was almost 1,000 Statice plants, I always found time to go after the blue. The blue is one of those colors that you have limited choices for on the farm. And the Statice blue, very vibrant, very punchy. Because the way the flowers on a Statice are, they're small but spread out. They're kind of like fingernails is how a Statice stem is. So you just get this little bit, this little pop of color, and the structure of it is very stiff. It makes for a great finishing piece on a bouquet. You can put it around the outside edges and almost cage in your flowers. It gives this little bit of structure, this little bit of glow of color. Yeah, I love it. And that's just fresh. Statice dried is even better, maybe. I have mountains of it dried that I'm very excited to use. I use it in almost every single dried craft or bouquet that I ever make, and it holds its color. The Statice blue dries blue. Number 6 is Ranunculus Elegance in the orange. Ranunculus is incredible for us. I've heard it can be a real challenge to grow, and it also doesn't like springs that warm up very fast, which is something that we can suffer from. This year was probably the best ranunculus season we will ever have because we had a long, cold spring. When we first started growing ranunculus, we were doing mainly the pastels and the whites, the more traditional colors, and I didn't even realize you could get them in brights. which always makes me laugh because it is of the buttercup family, so you'd think yellow, should be able to get yellow. Once we realized that there is a whole rainbow of colors we could work with, we did our best to get our hands on them. And this year we had yellow, orange, red, purple, burgundy, just incredible, incredible colors to go along with our pinks and pastels and whites. But the orange is the one. If I could grow only orange ranunculus, I feel like I could still make a go at strong spring stales. The way they glowed, the impact that orange made against the green foliage, and especially because it's so early in the season. The ranunculus come right after the tulips finish, before any other flowers are really available. Everyone is looking for something bright and cheery, especially in Kelowna, BC, Canada, where I live. We have a gray, dark, long winter, so seeing those bright colors back again, they bring a lot of joy and a lot of excitement to our customers, which leads to a lot of sales. This coming year, we have 300 of the orange. I'm very excited. Hundreds of the other colors too, and I could see more orange every year. Number 7 is Bupleurum. This is one that surprised me. As I was making this list, some things were obvious, like those orange ranunculus. But I came to realize that maybe one of the items that I was most excited about that I'd experimented with this year for the first time was Bupleurum. I did a single planting of it in the spring. It likes the cool weather to germinate and to grow. And so I only had it for a window of, about a month. In the future, I'm going to do succession plantings of it so that I can have it for even longer, because it was incredible. It added so much to bouquets. They always say that greenery adds more than you think it would. And when I go through the list of greeneries I could live without, it's very easy for me to be like, yeah, it adds to the bouquet, but do I need it? When it came to Bupleurum, when I was going through the greeneries, I was like, this I don't think I could live without. This I think I would choose over another flower. Even for me, even if I was building my own bouquet, this I want. It had these gorgeous chartreuse tones. And the other thing that blew my mind, because I didn't realize this, is you can dry it, and dried, it looks incredible too. The more experience I get with growing flowers for selling, the more I'm getting picky about the greeneries I used. Originally, I started using mostly basil, and I was fairly happy with that. But as I've worked my way into more perennials, things like mints, I have a Russian tarragon I love, I've come to realize that maybe those perennials are better as a greenery, than those simple annuals. But Bupleurum is an annual, it is a greenery, and I think it trumps those perennials, which makes it a top 10. Number 8 is a sunflower, because you gotta have a sunflower on the top 10 list. And specifically, my number 1 choice of sunflowers is downy mildew resistant orange Procuts. I love the Procuts. They look fake. That's the only way I can describe it. The first time I saw them, I thought, that's not a real sunflower, that is a fake flower. They're so perfect, they don't look real. And they come in, I don't even know how many colors at this point. It feels like there's probably a dozen different colors. But if I was only allowed to grow one, it would have to be orange. And if I was only allowed to grow one orange, because they have multiples, I'd choose the downy mildew resistant one, because the disease resistance makes it very easy to grow in the earlier season and the later season too, when there might be more moisture and might be more downy mildew. I think that you can build a successful retail flower business selling only sunflowers. Here on our farm, we stick a sunflower into a summer bouquet and it sells. We take a handful of sunflowers, make that a bouquet, and it sells. And when we don't have sunflowers, it's one of the only flowers that people then complain to us like, hey, where's your sunflowers? I came to get a bouquet, there is no sunflowers, I can't buy from you. This year we messed up our sunflowers a little bit, so it's important to me that sunflowers are on this top 10 list, because it's important to me to watch back at this video and remind myself, don't mess up your sunflowers. You want to have those every single week, as many weeks as possible. I know sometimes just the basic orange sunflower can seem boring and simple and not exciting, especially in a world where there's things like Lisianthus and Ranunculus and all these different exotic new plants that you are not used to. But despite that, sometimes simple is the right answer. And as a flower farmer, my goal isn't to grow what I like. It's not to sell what I'm excited about. It's to give my customers what they want, and mostly they want sunflowers. Number 9 is Costa Apricot Snapdragons. And I have to be honest, my number 1 Snapdragon is Potomac. That is what I think is the best cut flower Snapdragon. But this Costa Apricot color is incredible. And while I had it available, I was making bouquets based just on how good it looked. And they sold. Customers were really excited about it. When I described the color, I called it buttered popcorn. You know, the apricot is a term that's used to describe flowers a lot that can be a whole range of different colors. It can go from yellows into pinks and still be labeled as an apricot. The Costas, you know, they were this warm, beautiful yellow and then had these glowing pink details to it, and I love them. The Costa is one of the earliest blooming snapdragons that we grow here on our farm, and that also makes, you know, it very valuable. It's easy to have snapdragons in the summer growing the Potomacs, but we always hit a window kind of in June where the Ranunculus has finished, but maybe our zinnias haven't, you know, come to maturity yet, and you know, that's when we're struggling. And the Costa is there for me. The snapdragons themselves I can sell as straight bunches. One thing I never knew about snapdragons until I started farming them is they smell incredible. They actually smell like sweet bubble gum. So having a bouquet of just snapdragons in your house actually, you know, there's the beauty of the classic look of the snapdragons, but there also is the beauty of the smell. And finally, number 10 is Terracotta Yarrow. This Yarrow I can't get enough of. Every year I grow more of it, and I don't know if I'll ever feel like I have enough. I love Yarrow because you can use it as a disc flower, right? It's this circle of color. So when your flower options are limited, you can actually use it to, you know, be really show-stopping. But you can also use it as a base. You can also use it as a filler. I'll put it lower in the bouquet so it's not super visible from the top. And then it just adds this glow, this depth to the flowers and to the colors and everything that you don't necessarily see right away, but it still adds a huge amount of value. The stems, they're very, very tall on the terracotta color, and then they blend so perfectly. This terracotta color is perfect color. It can look orange when I put it with my orange stuff. It can look browny and boho-y when I put it with my brown things, but it also can complement really bright colors. It can be bright, it can be very neutral with whites and, you know, simple tones. This, even though it's not exciting, you know, this is a perfect example of something that isn't a focal flower, but I still want it to be on my top 10 list. It isn't exciting. The color isn't exciting, but it adds so much value that it's similar to the Rudbeckia. I sold every single stem of the Terracotta Yarrow that I picked out of my gardens, and I have hundreds of plants. I sold thousands of stems, and despite that, I still could have used even more. And it dries incredibly. Sometimes the most boring flowers have a lot of value if you just give them a little bit more space to do what they do best. If I'm honest, this list was impossible to come up with. It's very hard for me to narrow my choices down to just 10. And I also feel like some of this list is influenced by the excitement that some of these flowers had for me in growing them for the first year. That's why it's the top 10 of 2022. No promises it won't be different next year. The one list that's a little bit easier for me to come up with, though, is what didn't do well. That I know instantly, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in my next video. Thanks again to our sponsor, Ritual. And don't forget to check out the link in our description to get 20% off your first month's worth of vitamins.